Hello, everyone. We're gonna give it a few minutes, just to let some people join. I know we had a lot of people say they're going to attend, so we are gonna wait just a few more minutes. But I just want to let everyone know, yes, we are here. The Chicago user group is back in action. We had a brief hiatus, but we're just gonna. I want to let you guys know I'm here. But we'll just give it till 6:05, and then we'll kind of dive right in. Alrighty, guys, welcome to the July 2020 Power BI user group, sponsored by your own personal Wi-Fi, which is probably Xfinity. Xfinity is not sponsoring, but we're more than happy if they did. So, just to give you guys a heads up, it's probably going to be an hour at most today. Hopefully, you guys didn't cancel plans with anyone to do a 2-hour event tonight. We're just going to do just an hour tonight. A few things come up, and I'm a little under the weather, but we'll get through it. And if anyone knows me, they also know how much of a Yankee fan I am. And this is not why it's an hour tonight, but tonight's also opening day. So when I scheduled this user group, realizing we haven't met in 3 months, and I haven't seen any of your faces in 3 months, that the fact that I scheduled the Yankee game, I have not watched the Yankees in over 18 months, or not 18, but in a long time. That I scheduled the Power BI user group for the same day should just show how much I love this user group. And so excited to have you guys here. So again, so let's kind of dive in. Just a few updates. Here is really the first thing is we will be doing our monthly. I know I said this with Gil, but if for those who are meeting with on April, but we will be continuing to do our monthly updates, and we'll be continuing to do it on a virtual level. I may send out a poll here and there. I know things are rising again, so unfortunately, I think the chance of us meeting in the fall is probably limited or not very strong right now. If there's anyone on this call, those who are dedicated, who kind of want to put together a Chicago user group panel, kind of the people who've been there in terms of things that we can do, things that would be more interactive, that would in a sense take away from the virtual feel of to try to make it as interactive as possible. Everyone, please email me. I'll put my email below. And email me if you'd like to be kind of in a more leadership role in this user group, and especially now, but also moving forward as we go into, hopefully at one point we get back to meeting downtown. But if anyone want to do a Zoom call or Microsoft Teams call to say, how can we make this interactive, please let me know. We are excited. I can't announce the name yet, but we will have, hopefully in August or the month after, a very special speaker. We're trying to get Mike Carlo from Power BI Tips to come speak. Come speak virtually. Technically, if he wanted to, he could come to my house. He's in Milwaukee, so him and Seth. But we're not going to do that. We'll do a virtual, but we should be getting them to speak on one of their real famous talks about basically best tools and tricks by Power BI Tips. So nothing's in stone yet, but we're hopefully should have that for August. So let's kind of dive in, and kind of what I said is we'll probably be done the latest around 7, just for some time constraints. But let's go over quickly just a few updates in Power BI that I really wanted to share that some of you may have missed. So one of the biggest things to come to Power BI is really, if we kind of dive in. Actually, we'll show it together when we do the. So, having just a few technical issues here. So, all right. So let's kind of dive into data flows real quick and kind of start talking about really what we're going to be kind of focusing on tonight. Again, this might be a series that we do with data flows, and this might be the start. But one of the biggest things that we've been hearing come up over and over again from users, from companies, and I hear in my own job, and then I hear kind of online too in the industry, is Power BI has a lot of tools, a lot of neat tools, but it's how do you best utilize them? And if you're at an organization and you're kind of the sole Power BI guy, you're the one kind of doing the administration, that's great. You might have a team, but one of the biggest hindrance to, I think we've talked about this before in terms of governance. So tonight's going to really focus on how data flows go into the process of using Power BI. Our next talk is really going to be talking about how to actually the utilization of data flows in terms of the technical side, and I'll kind of dive in more. So tonight's going to be more of an kind of high level view, and just to show what you can do with it. So in the chat, if you want to say, have you used data flows before? I know the last time I've asked, not a lot of people have. So I want to introduce, my goal tonight is to introduce you to what the data flows interface looks like and the best use for it, just starting off, again, without even diving into it. Again, I wanted to also say, for those who are new, opening day has started, but I love this user group more. So more so we'll kind of be focusing on Power BI, kind of not baseball, but we will, as always, be using baseball stats. So tonight, my goal is to kind of accomplish and convince you of in any report that you normally do, and especially if there's other people at your company using Power BI, what the biggest problem is, we have the different tables or the same tables either from SQL, from CSV, from Excel, from OData. We all connect to the same source. But what everyone does with their filters is completely different across the board. And that can lead to a lot of times variances in the data, a lot of times having different data and different reports, even though you're using the same source. And then trying to validate, okay, how many steps are in your query? Do you have 35 steps? Okay, which one are you filtering on? Are you filtering on this value or this value? Even though it's the same source, we all do our different things. So this is where really data flows could come into play. I wouldn't think of it as much as that from an ETL point of view, but really thinking about this as create your own gold dimensional tables. Because you might have a fact table or a certain tables that you do some filters on, but you have to always do filters in Power BI because you have to merge it on two different things that you normally couldn't do in SQL. So that's where data flows are going to come in handy, and that's where I want to convince you all tonight to really start utilizing and implementing in your organization now. Normally, you just need premium. Usually, you gotta use it in a workspace, but generally you can kind of get around it and use Power BI Dataflows kind of in any case. So let's take a look and let's bring up Power BI wherever we can find it. Here it is. So let's say we're in a workspace that we have, and basically data flows are going to be the same thing. And think of them storing it if you had multiple workspaces. So let's say you had a bunch of workspaces that use your company. The first thing to kind of think of data flows as kind of your folders for your data sets. How is this different from Power BI connected data sets? So the biggest one, and this is where I think data flows kind of get their real kind of luster from, and is the fact that when you connect to a Power BI data set and a connection, it's a live connection. You cannot connect to any other data. You can only use the data sources and in that Power BI data set. So it's basically it's another level above direct query. So that's huge in terms of the limitedness of what a data set can do. Great for a governance point of view in terms of using the same report, but a lot of times our reports need a few differences. We need to add another table or another view. So data flows kind of really come into play in terms of the ability, at the very least, to have everyone speak in the same language. And this is like if you have a dimensional table of dates, if you have geography, everyone's using the same data set with the same references. Again, a lot of people say, well, can't we just do that in SQL? Well, sometimes you don't have a SQL data set. Also, sometimes you're merging on a few things. It may not solve for every problem. The other thing that makes data flow so attractive in terms of what it can do is the fact that it's using a Power BI query. What do we mean by that? We mean exactly that. The same transformations that you do in Dataflow, that you do in Power BI Desktop, you can do exactly in the Power Dataflow query. So let's go. We're in a workspace, and I'm going to click on Dataflow. I'm just going to hide that real quick. So once you start going to the data flow, you kind of get a very beginning part where we're looking at, and it basically says a few different options for us. Now the biggest thing here is that don't worry, the other options are more if you have premium, except for the import model. We're not going to focus on that today. The one that's going to be most important to you is going to be the define new queries. And this is really what we want to start with. So all we have to do is click on define new queries, and we get a very similar interface as we would if we connected to data in Power BI. Desktop, that is. So you see, these are all the sources that you can connect to. And again, a file, a folder, SharePoint folder, web API, web page. So the web API actually may be new, or a blank query. So let's just say a blank table, and we'll just go into this. And again, we have the general data. And we'll call this our first. So another important thing to kind of note is that I just kind of wanted to at least kind of introduce to you is the fact. Oh, okay. You might have noticed here. That's not what I want to do at all. That's fine. Live. Okay. You may have noticed as my computer begins to freeze. Just hold on, guys. One sec. Okay. You may have noticed that when I'm looking at this, I kind of have a name for it called DF test. So this is kind of part of the overall governance side of using Power BI is having some different naming conventions. We've talked about this before. And one of the things is sometimes if we're doing a loading query, we want to give it a certain nomenclature. So data flow test here. And all we do is we connect to next. And then we're going to get a very familiar interface that we normally would. It's a bit slower in the query, but it does the same, in a sense, it solves the same concept that you normally would have. We can do transform, add columns. Again, I can do most of the same transformations I already can. So there are a few limitations to data flows. I should note that from the get-go. There's a few transformations or data types that do not work. We've seen experiences where and bugs with Power BI with data flows where someone may actually see the data flow, someone wouldn't, and then because the date time was date time in one and date in the other. So kind of odd things. Just anonymous asks, can you create data models in data flows? No. So one of the things that should be coming out, and this is Microsoft talked about this at the business summit in their conference, was they will be putting live data sets, the Power BI live data sets into composite models, which is huge. And you can actually do the by model that way. So you can actually have an import data or two different Power BI data models all in the same Power BI data set. Now, granted, that I think that's a little longer away, and it will be in preview when it comes out. So these are all things that you obviously take with a bit of caution, but that is something that I know Microsoft is planning to kind of get out there at some point. The needs there, but that's a great question. So in the interim, I would say probably you'll be using data flows rather than those composite models when those come out in a very live way, probably for another year. You may have access to it, but I wouldn't do anything in production with that yet. So let's say we have our data flow. We're just going to save and close this. We're going to call this and we're just going to save the data flow. So great. Now I've created a data flow. Now who gets access to that? So again, based on the workspace, and this is very important, based on the workspace that you're dealing with, that's going to determine a lot in terms of who can have access. It's going to follow the same access rules. Oh, excuse me. It's going to follow the same access rules that you would in being able to access a workspace. So if you can edit in Power BI Workspace, you can see it. If you can read, you can also see it. So Workspace is kind of put on a new meeting now in terms of their ability to kind of allow people to see certain data flows, and also from a self-service. The way we're talking about it tonight, I'm kind of focused more on your BI authors, so the team, rather than the self-service point of view. But you can absolutely set it up in the same way with data flows from a read point of view. So now let's say that data flow has been refreshed. We go to Power BI Desktop. And all we have to, how do I get the data now? So all I have to do is, I'm just going to click on get data, data flows. We'll wait for something to come up. You'll see the workspace is here. And then you'll notice here too, this looks awfully familiar to if you're dealing with a SQL query or a SQL database. For those who connect to SQL, that looks awfully familiar. And I think that was kind of their goal. And so you can see here, we've literally created you can almost even call it a custom connection into data flows in Power BI. So we're going to just transform this. Let's pull that up. And you can see here, we have the same data we had. And I want to pay close attention to the query here. Again, there's nothing you can edit. It's only reading ability only. So this gives a lot of power in terms of you can create and kind of make sure that certain data flows and certain workspaces and certain data sets are standardized. So in terms of if you always have to do, let's say there's always some changes you have to do to a certain data set for a dimensional table. If you had a list of customers or a customer database, but it's not perfect, because you always need to connect it to an Excel file to kind of validate it. Again, if you have to do that, and if you want every data set to be the same, every Power BI report would have to do that. Data flows takes that away. And basically for anyone, if depending how whatever the structure is, or even if it is for yourself, the amount of time this can save in terms of the ability just to easily say, I had to do, whenever we connect the customers, the way everything is now, and to get the customers right, I have 30 steps. The data flow can update every day, and you only have to connect to the data flow at every time. You don't need to connect all to the different data sets every single time, like in the old years of Power BI. So even if this is nothing else but for yourself, and you're acting selfishly and not really focused on other people, data flows are a huge win, especially for keeping the same tables in line. And you can change it one place. You change it in the data flow itself, and everything else updates. So Power BI just celebrated 5 years, and Seth Bauer of the Power BI Tips, and also the Milwaukee user group, said something funny, and I related. He said, "I can finally put on my resume or on recruiter's thing 5+ years of Power BI, because now it's only 5 years old." But since I've been fortunate enough to use Power BI since its inception, and one of the biggest things was, especially once we started rolling it out when it was a year or 2 years old, was the fact that we would have these great queries that we create and all the transformations, and you realize, well, everyone wants to see that now. We might have like 5 or 6 reports that were based on that, and business would come and say, oh, by the way, we're changing this one thing, so the database now is, instead of it's going to say CW, it's going to be CWW. Well, the problem is with that is you would have to go back to every single query, and we would have queries, and we would I think in year 2 we had queries that were in Excel files and Power Query and for Excel. that, Power Queries for Excel that basically took the place of data flows. And we had to go back to those data flows or those data queries, change the conditional formatting, change the logic, change the advanced query editor, and do the same thing. And the point that we can do this in data flows is absolutely huge. So I digress. Let's kind of go back and into really what we can do with this. So we have the query now. If again, one of the things we kind of want to remove from here, I want to remove our backslash here. So let's just replace a value. And we're good to go. Okay, so now we have that. So let's kind of talk about a real use case example and really show exactly how this is going to work. So imagine that, and going back to our example of using Excel, we had a lot of different, our baseball data. And again, baseball's back. And someone just let me know that Adam Eaton just homered on Garrett Cole. So I'm not that. I really wish I figured that out after. Anyways, again, those are for the baseball people here. We got another question. Another common use. So Pedro, thank you. This is kind of what we talked about before. So let me publish this. Another common use case is calendar table. So again, even if you had nothing else to do but a calendar table, at CompTube we have an Excel file that's our dim date table. But again, rather than everyone having to connect to that table and choose the right table and then make sure that the columns are formatted the right way, the data flow takes care of all that for us. So we actually have everything set up in a business intelligence master workspace, which is only a workspace for people like people who are really utilizing Power BI. That's basically those master tables, and a big one is a date table. How much times they're using date, and again, we've talked about this before, but if you don't have a date table, do it. That should be the next thing that you do. So let's say we're going back here, and I have here a SharePoint folder of all of my baseball data. And again, the way I connect to it is I have to connect individually. Again, I know there's folder example. You can do connect by folder, but because it's SharePoint, it's a little different because they're all have different column names. And again, I need this data every single time. So rather than doing the same connection every time, so let's say I need to connect to, and I'll do Teams, and we'll say add as a new query. Let's do, we'll do batting 2. I don't even think batting's there. Huh. That's okay. Why don't we do salaries as a new query? And we'll do pitching. Oh wait, there's batting. Okay. So let's just take and we need people. So go back, and again, this is all the connection here is just SharePoint. This is a SharePoint folder that we're filtering. And I need people too. So again, and this is all data that I need on a pretty regular basis. That that I need for a lot of different reports. Not actually a CompTIA, but again in this example. So if I were to do this every single time, I'd have to copy these queries. So we'll go and we'll kind of start doing our transformations here. Excuse me. Again, you'd have to do this every single time for a Power BI report, which can be absolutely tedious. And we'll show exactly how data flows kind of take that example and kind of run with it. So, okay, so my people one's here, great. So you can already see there's a transformation I need to do, and we'll do, oh, no, not pen queries. All we want to do is we want to use the first row of headers. Pretty simple. And I don't need all these tables here. I really just need just a few. And also with batting, it goes back to I think like 1876 or 1886. I'm really looking for just this millennium. I do not need kind of half the other data in here. So you can see there's like the debut. So with the debut, that's kind of we want to filter as much as we can here. So let's go to batting. We'll refresh this. So some of you may be asking here, hey, this is great. You're doing the desktop, but why aren't you doing it in Power or in the data flow itself? So Matthew Roach, who is actually someone who is kind of like the godfather of data flows. What he's actually done is actually showed a great example of actually using Power BI Desktop to kind of formulate and model your queries, and then just copy and paste the query. It's the same. It's still the M language. So a few things to note about that. One, it's a great idea, and you should absolutely do this. Another thing is, for sometimes from a ALM or kind of point of view, having a Power BI file that contains your data flows, or at least the kind of the loading, is a really great idea, because a lot of times, again, from the business point of view, we see that there's a lot of changes that may have to occur, and sometimes it's easier to do Power BI. Also, if you have a very complex data flow or query, it can get difficult to kind of manage, especially if something happens to it. So I would recommend, and again, it's not a universal case-by-case point of view, but I would recommend to always have a data flow or a Power BI desktop that has all of your queries. And that's basically, if you need to make changes, you can just copy and paste the actual code into the data flow. Again, sometimes the data flow can be a bit slow. All right, so we'll go to the tail end of this and kind of show. Well, in this case, let's go in and we'll just do this particular query, and I'm just going to copy this. And now I'm going to go to the data flow itself. We'll go back into our data flow. We'll add an entity, which is really just a query. I'll say a blank query. And again, it's the M language, so we can start typing here. I can even, and it's going to even start using, actually, I don't think it has, it doesn't have IntelliSense, or at least in that point of view. So you see, I can just paste everything here that I did in the desktop. And we'll go in, it's going to ask me to connect to credentials. Now, it may not work in Chrome, and that's just something that I've noticed. So this is where Microsoft Edge comes from point of view. We'll connect to this. Should be good to go. So now we're going to focus now just data flow and Power Query. We're doing the same transformations. Now, with the data flow, unlike Power BI Desktop, if you have some errors in your query, you may not actually be able to load. In Power BI Desktop, you can load it into your Power BI model, and it'll still work. Now, in data flows, if you have a data type that's wrong, or if there's a few things, it will not let you actually load the data flow. So that's just important to know. So this is all of our players. Or this is our batting. And so what we want to do here is, again, I don't need the year here is basically since 1871. I have data here to actually look at how people performed. Again, I really want to show. Let's see. Actually, no, I do not want to do that. Okay, let's go back to our data view. So I don't need all these columns, and I only need things since 2000. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to choose the year here. We're going to say greater than or equal to. And we're just going to say 2000. So this now will only give me players who have only bet. Now let's add that to our baseball data. And again, I have all the people ID again. So I have my batting here, and I'm going to bring in my people now. And we'll name this something right. Let's copy that. So now I have my, that's never good. Okay, so let's try that again. All right, let's see if we can cover from the cache. So also another reason, and not that I did that on purpose, but I think that's a great example of why you should always do things in Power BI Desktop. You can run into some of these problems. So luckily it did save most of it, but you're not always that lucky. So again, really important part of your data flows is to really kind of always use have a backup. All right, so let's keep going in. And now we have 2000 forward now. So now I only have baseball data, and I also only have players now that are from baseball forward. So what I want to do here is I only want, again, you'll notice this is my unique player ID here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this as a new query, just the players. We'll right click so we don't have to load it. Now let's go back to, actually we already have it saved. So now let's go back to, and we're going to just go to add, get data, applying query. People. And now we have our unique people. So great. So now, but again, this is containing everybody. This is containing birth years from 1877, which I don't think they played in the year 2000. Good on them if they did. But these are probably not the case that we want. So again, I hope everybody here is now really saying, you know what, maybe I should do this in the desktop first. Alex Powers is on this. Oh, okay, Alex. It's good to hear your voice, or I guess see you on here. So for those who don't know, Alex Powers is a Plenier All-Star. He is the equivalent to a Bernie Williams or Andy Pettit, a long-standing man in the world of Power BI, and he just said the answer to the question: no, you cannot create a model in data flows. This is largely because of the data extraction process, the source table leveling. So if anyone does not, Alex, you provide your Twitter so everyone can follow you. Alex is a phenomenal follow. He's and hopefully actually, and if you add your Twitter account to the chat, let's get you speaking on data flows. And kind of as we kind of dive into data flows, and I would like everyone on here and to tell your friends, one for Alex to speak, and then two, that he comes to Chicago the next time we ever allow people back in the city. So, fun note. I know that Iowa, we can't allow people from Iowa. My wife has a family in Iowa, so one of those excuses not to go to Iowa in the near future. So hopefully we do allow people back in the country. So, all right. So Alex just shared his, and I'll put this in the chat too, because I don't know if anyone else can see it. But basically, Alex is a great follow for great sources on Power BI. Technically, really, the Chicago user group should be sharing more. We don't. Alex is going to be our adopted parent of Power BI, some news and information. All righty. So let's kind of dive in. So now, again, we're dealing with some of the basic stuff here. And we have the people, unique people, and again, we're dealing with birth years of 1866. You know, and it'd be fun to actually search how many people are from your town, but we can do that another day. So let's keep going back in, and now again, we're going back to the batters, and we'll wait for this to load. And so now I have this again. What I initially did, and again, I've been very lucky that Power BI has kept my cache. My cookies, my store location. But again, I would really try to focus on doing this in the data model. So I have this list of people who are only players that have played in the year 2000 or after. And again, if there is someone from 1866, great, but probably not. So why do I have this, and why do I not have it loaded? So what I'm going to just do is I'm actually going to, oh boy. All right, so let's convert it to a table. You know, I'm getting worried now as I try to publish this. This may take a while, but we'll see how it goes. So wait for this to load. And again, we'll make this a text. So again, this is all stuff you normally would do in desktop had data flows not been around. And what we're going to do here is we're going to remove duplicates. So now we just have a single list. Again, could you do this in SQL? Yes, but is all your data available in SQL? Do you have access to edit it? This kind of gives another level of security, you know, because you might have a data, but you might be the database administrator. So if that's the case, great. But you may also not have some of the access and the ability to write into a database, or you're dealing with Google Analytics or Sailthrough or an API. So there's a lot of different reasons why data flows kind of come in handy. So let's go back and again, let's go to our people. And we're going to do something really simple here. We're just going to merge queries together. We're going to do an inner merge. So my people are only going to show me they're only going to show me pitchers who've only played since the 2000. And I think, yeah, so no, we want to do inner. So we want to do inner merge. And the reason why, and I don't know why they don't have this part in desktop. I love it here because it actually tells you what's going on. Basically, these are the merges. We've talked about merging Power Query. If anyone would want a kind of a focused group session on merges and the use cases for each one, just reach out to Alex. No, reach out to me on Meetup or on LinkedIn or any way that you could normally contact me. And if we get enough people interested in that, we can kind of do a session on each of these examples. In this case, I only want to do inner because what I want is I don't need all the people who have not played before or who never saw the light of day in baseball before the year 2000. So you can see the two circles here. It's showing me I have two tables. It's only include what matches in each. Really, what I would want to do is write only, but for the case of simplicity, we'll do the inner only. Write only is going to keep everything from the other table, but we don't necessarily care about that. We just need only matching rows because I want them to be in batting and in people. So we'll wait for this to load. And I hope everyone, and all of a sudden now you start to see this. Yeah, some people played their last year, not their last year, but you now see there shouldn't be anything below certain year. Julio Franco, I bet, will be in here. But there are some people in here who their last year was in 2000 in some way, shape, or form. So great. So now we have all this, and I'm going to remove this table because it's not a data type that Dataflows likes as much. So again, this is going a bit slow in Power Query, and let's say you had to do this every time, and you'll say you worked for the MLB, or someone had to deal with baseball stats, or any example. Again, hopefully everyone's mind is absolutely exploding right now. And in terms of the use cases, it's going to be at your own company, because we're doing the same transformations. And let's say now we're good to go. I have my batting, I have my people. I've done a simple transformation here. I can even add a date table into this data flow as well, kind of do what I need to do. But in this case, now I just have my batting and my people, and all we're going to do is save and close. And again, everyone cross your fingers, and hopefully we don't get that error problem. But again, what I could have also done is taken all the advanced editor queries, like done ridiculous transformations in real time in Power BI Desktop. And as long as all the names of the queries are the same, just copy and paste the code. It's like copy and pasting a recipe, and every time you come out with whatever you're making. So I would recommend that because again, this can be a little tedious doing they've done a great job with Dataflows in terms of the user interface and the speed of it, processing speed, but your desktop's always going to be faster. So again, one of the basics it's going to do now, and this may take a bit, is going to validate queries. Again, part of the problem, Dataflow should not take an example of every problem that you have, but it should most. There are a few cases, and we'll dive in this next month, or or the next time we do Dataflows. Again, we might have Mike and Seth speaking at our next one, but if this is interesting, we'll dive in a little more and to show kind of ways to kind of connect data flows together, because you might have some use cases where you simply have a data flow that's too big, and you kind of have loading data flows that connect to each other. Because let's say I actually had something here that was enormous, and let's say I had something that was we're dealing with 95 steps. You're dealing with millions of rows of data. And on top of that, you still need to connect it to SQL and multiple other queries. Now, data flows can be finicky in terms of their ability to refresh. You guys, depending on what you do, I would try to start small, then start expanding, save data flows that you know work, and build off of those. But I wouldn't necessarily start with something large and try to use that in production. Also, I would not, if you are going to build another data flow or there's a completely new logic that has to change, I would highly recommend to have a development workspace to test that data flow out, making sure that it refreshes. Because the last thing you want to do is break your old data flow that other people are using, especially, and this goes back to the governance side, the adoption and process. If you are now managing data flows for a company, or let's say for a BI team, now it's your job to really not change anything ad hoc without kind of giving the instructions out. So, and there's always going to be examples where business like, what, can you add an audience column, or, this is not right, this should be to the sales team member. So, and you always have to backtrack. And again, always have something saved before you work on it, because you want your original data flow in case something breaks. Because again, you're making a once you start kind of implementing data flows into your company, or into your organization, there's a large dependency. And that's one of the things I wish people talked about more with data flows is that dependency part of it. Is now, how does that work in terms of from an actual process and standards? Because data flows are great, they do amazing, but they now add to the governance side of it a very large trust in that data, and if anything breaks, it's going to break a lot of other reports. So and once we load this, we will be done for the night. Again, we're just doing an hour today. Hopefully, again, next month we'll have Mike and Seth, and then again, if everyone reaches out to Alex and says, "Hey, speak in Chicago," we'll have Alex as well. But again, we'll be going back. So okay, so it's refreshed. So let's go back to our query, and we'll go back, and you notice I have some of these things. And one thing I need to do right now is I am going to save this as original code. Just so I have it. And let's just remove that. All right. So let's go back to our data flows, and now we're going to see something really neat. So again, I haven't done the transformations here, like the query and the remove duplicates, but let's just go. And all I'm going to do now, rather than, again, what you would normally do, especially if those examples, if you are merging and grouping, group by merging, the very complex stuff to get the data right, if you're doing a ABC model, if you're doing a predictive model, if you're creating a customer lead scoring, system, you could do that in the data flow rather than having to deal with having to have 6 queries in every report. And now it's going to be as simple as just going back to data flows. Actually, no, we're going to go to, you guys aren't allowed to see that. And you'll see here, it's just 2 tables. And again, I could have had a transformation here of, let's say, 100 steps with multiple transformations. But now the user or myself, again, it doesn't matter in terms of if now I have the data already good to go. I may need to change a few things. Sometimes date and date time can be finicky. But in terms of the ability to load, and now all we load, and you'll look at the query. So it doesn't contain all the steps, so no one can, if you only wanted to show players after the year 2000, now everyone's going to see that. And I can build off of this in Power BI Desktop, just like I could any query. Just like you could SQL, I can group by, I can remove, I can filter off of this, but the only place to edit the source of this or the query we initially did is back in the data flow. Again, I really hope I'm doing a good job of explaining how this can transform your process and just save time, but two, allow better quality data, better trust in the data, and also the biggest thing is I hope you guys are seeing use cases for this in terms of ways that you can utilize this in your company immediately. Ways you can utilize this in your reports immediately. So let's go in. Again, I have my people here. Okay, it looks all distinct. I don't see anything 1886. So the first year I see this, and then again, one of the things I love about Power BI is the ability to see this 1959. Who in the world is from 1959? It's probably Julio Franco. Actually, who do we have here? Harold Raines played in 2000. Okay, Michael Thomas and Tim Raines. Okay, Tim Raines did play. Okay. Yeah, I guess that's right because Tim Raines came in with Derek Jeter. All right. Anyways, so another great thing about Power BI is the ability to kind of do some of your statistical descriptive analysis. Anyways, we'll look at Harold Raines numbers in here as well. So now we're just going to load this in, and again, it's not going to do all the different loading. It's just loading data flow. It's not doing any of the other transformations that you had to do in the data flow. It's just almost in a sense like loading a static table or a SQL table. It's all the heavy lifting is already done. And to me, that's the beauty of this. Let's make a relationship out of this. By the way, if anyone knows back when I can do my quick action toolbar in Power BI, I hope that's coming in August. We'll see. All right, so players ID, we are good to go. We have our relationships and we are good to go. So, okay, so guys, at this point, we'll leave it to Q&A. Thank you guys so much. Again, I know it's only an hour tonight. We kind of skipped over some of the updates and kind of dived in really what Dataflows can do. So I'm just gonna leave it for if anyone has any questions at this point. Happy 5 years to Power BI. It's good to see or at least have people on the call. And again, if there's anyone who wants to be on the panel on making this interactive, just let me know. So Pedro says, should we always publish a map to the common data model when we build a data flow? No, you don't have to. You might not have a common data model. I don't think it's a necessity. I think you can, you should, but I wouldn't say it's a necessity from the BI point of view, mainly because everyone might not have access to it. In your company may not configure with a common data model. So I think that's a good question, but I wouldn't necessarily say that's something that we would always do. So Alex just says, I'll publish this. Another great way to get started with data flows is centralizing your calendar tables. Just beware our link across workspaces does require premium capacity. So I'll start with the first part of that, and thank you, Alex. So he says, a great way to start with data flows is your calendar tables or your timetables, actually, because I will show a quick preview of this. So let's go to my data flows. I think I have a timetable in here too. We have a master. Yeah, so actually we have we have a timetable and a dim data flow table. So everything's already centralized, and what we've done in our data flow is some of the things like previous quarter, year, end of month. We've built off the Excel files and made these data flows kind of work. But we also have a timetable, and again, it's nothing more than an Excel file. But it's easier than Excel because one, you're not doing the same transformation, and then if you're dealing with a larger group of people, like everything's already done for you. You don't have to say what table it is. Everything's done for you. And if you're dealing with other people, it's not like, hey, remember, you have to use this link in SharePoint. It solves a lot of those problems. So start with your date tables and kind of build from there. So any other questions? So, okay, and we'll just put a few more. Okay, so I'll publish that. So the common data model, for those who are not aware, actually, Alex, that may be a great one for you to talk about. But let's see, we'll just wait a few more if we have any other questions. Alrighty, guys, I really hope you guys start look into Dataflows. I'll send you guys the link now of that's probably not the best thing to all right. So let me send this link out to everybody. This is the guy you really want to start working with in terms of getting data. Oh, actually, well, we'll just work with that. And this is probably the link. By the way, I love that font. So this is where you want to start. Oh, that's that's Alex still. Let's do this. Here we go. So Matthew Roach, this guy is huge. It kind of like talks about data flows ad hoc. So I would really recommend you looking into his blog, subscribe to it. And also for Common Data Model, Alex has sent one GitHub repository. That's a good resource too. So look at, again, be inspired today. Be inspired by data flows, if nothing else. See how that can transform your process. Speed up your time in Power BI, which is, I think, the biggest thing, and allow for a universal source of truth that everyone can use, and you can roll out and kind of manage and now to build trust. So with that, hopefully we kind of talked about kind of a quick recap. We introduced data flows and we talked about how it can be one source of location, one to kind of keep a process for your own individual reporting, but two, from a company on a wide scale, being able to easily do your transformations, but keep one view and one table that everyone can use that has the transformations already included in it. So with that, thank you guys so much for joining the July 2020 Power BI user group. Be inspired by data flows. I am now going to see if the Yankees are winning or losing. Everyone, hopefully enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you guys so much. And again, reach out to me about the panel, and we will see you guys in a few weeks. All right. Thanks, guys.